Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Agents of Dev podcast. I'm Mitch Ashley. I lead the software lifecycle engineering analyst practice at the Futurum Group. Brad, welcome. Always good to be doing this with you, my co-host.
Yeah, it's great to be doing the show with you today, Mitch. And I think we have a fun topic on hand. Something that I'm sure a lot of people that are listening in are exploring and or dealing with right now, which is the idea of how do you use agentic tools to actually build code on day 2, not day 1.
Mm-hmm. But so when you go beyond the travel agent, book my flight, find me a flight example on every developer blog. How do you use this IDE to actually do your own work? So we are talking about, we're going to probably touch on 3 of them. I know we've had a lot of the most recent activity with Google Anti-Gravity, with AWS Kiro, some announcements at AWS reInvent, and of course, Bob
What
from
about
IBM.
Bob?
And what about
Sorry,
Bob?
I will never tire of that.
What about Bob?
I'm a child of the 60s, 70s, so I definitely know about Bob.
And we have, of course, Copilot and all, Cursor and Windsurf, and there's all, everybody has an IDE these days, which I can't remember if I said this on a previous podcast, but, I thought all those developer jobs were going away. We're sure creating a lot of tools for these people that aren't going to have jobs. And so I don't believe those jobs are going away. They're changing for sure. That's for sure.
Actually, you know what? I think you're right. I like the notion that all of this tooling is going into helping people who do the jobs that they lost. To basically do the work that you used to do, but do it in a new way.
So you're saying this is retooling to how to get your next job? Is that what it is?
Yeah, just to get a raise, because otherwise you have to quit and come back.
That's right. Well, I think that's an axiom of the universe. I think that seems to be universally true in about every. It's funny when you give people that advice. How do you get a raise? Well, you should probably go somewhere else and then come back, go get a lot more money. Tends to happen. Tends to be true. Of the IDEs, have you spent more time with one than the other? I know you do a lot of development with Gemini, but of course, Anti-Gravity is pretty new stuff. Is there anyone you have more familiar with than the other?
Yeah, as you say, I use Gemini CLI a lot because I got into computers because of ASCII art. I will stay in computers because of ASCII art. So,
do you have that Mona Lisa still on green bar in your?
It was Jerry Garcia. Believe it or not, was my first mind blowing ASCII art experience.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah. So I and as you know, I have a profound hatred of Electron. So I don't use many of the Electron-based tools, which are quite a few of them right now, because so many tools are based on VS Code. And that's great because it has a rich ecosystem and a lot of plugins, et cetera, et cetera. But I've been using, if I'm not using Zed, which has agentic tooling built in, for non-Gemini CLI, I've really been gravitating toward open code, which has a degree of what we're going to talk about today baked into it. And I've noticed this more and more with these tools that, they have 2 modes and you can just toggle them, from the command line, because that's why we use a command line, so we don't have to reach and click. Anyway, so you can basically just toggle to thinking mode or planning mode, and then toggle back to coding mode or fixing mode or whatever you want to call it. And it can be anything you want, actually, because you can customize those to be whatever you want, a la, was it Claude's skills kind of idea?
Yeah. Claude has skills, yeah.
And part of what this toggling does to planning mode is to help you to set up, a very rigorous or supposedly rigorous methodology and framework for doing something, be that creating your new Find Me a Flight app, or on day 2, fixing your flight app because it's throwing a silent error that you can't trace back to the source.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into planning mode and say, wow, I can't find this error, it will say, okay, he doesn't want me to just jump in and fix it. He wants me to think about what the problem is, define the problem, define the steps to resolve the problem, and then we can switch back over to execute mode and fix it. And that's spec-driven development.
Mm-hmm.
What we're seeing right now is sort of a maturation of that, where a lot of these tools are sort of bringing in purpose-built spec-driven tools. Sorry, these IDEs are bringing in spec-driven tools. So you have, as you mentioned, Bob has it baked in. Kiro from AWS has it baked in. You can download and use OpenAI, or it's GitHub's Spec Kit, which you can actually run in pretty much anything you want. And these tools basically do a couple of things. They'll let you sort of initialize your projects if you've never run them in there before. And when they do that, they'll do, actually I wrote it down because I did this last night with Conductor, which is this plugin. They call it, Google calls it an extension.
An extension. Oh, yes,
which
we
I
need
think
a different term.
We do. Well, because it's really different than just using an MCP server. Yeah, an extension is the entire package built into the surrounding tool itself. And so it can itself include MCP servers.
So it's like a mod in, Minecraft or something.
Yeah, totally right. Yes. For those who don't know, Mitch enjoys a bit of the game.
I have been known to partake on a few weekends or two, counting this last one.
And it's yes, we must talk about that, by the way, because I found that very fascinating, because what Mitch did this weekend in sort of asking Agentic AI to talk to him or to create for him a sort of means of saying, what does Mitch like to play? I found that really, really cool.
This is with ChatGPT, just as an aside. I asked it, I said, so I do a lot of work with you. A lot of my preferences, I've explicitly created artifacts with you about a number of them. None of them about gaming, but I have asked a few questions. So analyze for me, what kind of game? What kind of games do you think I like? What kind of games don't you think I like, and why? And it went through, and it said, and it was very accurate. And it's because I have such short time windows. I can't do games that are, sit down for a weekend and really play the whole thing. Like no
Skyrim for you.
Skyrim. Well, I could. So it's possible. If it's possible, and you don't have to step back in and there's a whole storyline that you're following, that you have to remember that you talked to this person way back when,
right?
All that kind of stuff. So if you can kind of step in and out of it, it's much more acceptable. So even like Civilization, Civ 6, I'm not a fan of 7 yet, but it is gets complex towards the end of the game, the end game. But I can pause, I can save, and come back, start over, do whatever. That's kind of the games that I like.
Yeah. And I have to ask, do you have memory turned on in ChatGPT? Have you had it turned on for a while?
I have. I've had it turned on for quite a while, probably 2-3 months at least.
And I think that actually speaks to the topic of hand today, does it not? Because spec-driven development is really nothing more than treating context like a managed artifact that sits next to your code.
I was thinking exactly the same thing in getting ready for this podcast. Is you can see the parallels between the let's call them retail versions of these products, the ChatGPTs of the world, Claude, etc., is very much the same thing. As they are creating what they call artifacts, and like you open a canvas, that's now an artifact that within some context window, within a particular tool, that it's going to remember those things. And so if you want it to remember, one of the things I did was create a little memory system at one point where I wrote out, remember these things out to JSON.
Oh, you didn't make a graph database to
no,
do that, Mitch?
I didn't have that much time that weekend. But it was experimental, kind of see how would this work and recall. And so, but that's what these kind of spec-driven or the intent-driven, I guess, is what Bob calls. It's interesting to me that weren't we doing spec-driven development all along? We kind of were, but now we have a way of actually integrating it into the workflow. Yes,
Yeah,
it was
I was
with
actually
stories and all that
a
before.
spec-driven human in a past life. I was a business analyst, and so I would work with the developers to define the project, to set all of the goals for the project, to define the tech stack we were going to use, et cetera. And that's really what these tools do. So to jump back to this conductor extension for Gemini CLI, I had a project that was only 350 lines long, so very tiny. And it did something. It was basically a research agent because we're analysts, so
Always
it's
looking
kind
for
of
someone to do some work for us.
right, not lazy at all. So when I initialized it, it did a number of things, and it was kind of interesting because it actually opened up and ran within the CLI tool itself another CLI tool that had a user interface where it was basically a ABC. You just would say, it would ask you a question and you'd answer and then hit return, or you would enter just a sentence to say, no, this is what I mean. And it would guide you through the steps of trying to initialize this project for spec-driven development. And what it got to at the end of that process was it defined the project goals. It defined the tech stack by looking at what I had, which is something we should come back to, actually, because it's an ongoing pet peeve, and spec-driven development doesn't solve the problems that we already have in these tools. Just everyone note that. Anyway, it would define the code style for it, the style guide, PEP 8 for me, and it defined the overall project guidelines. And importantly, and I've found this really fascinating, is that it identified and documented known blockers to the projects to getting things done. So a blocker is a constraint or missing information or whatever, would keep the agent from completing whatever task you give it. So
you finally found a way to constrain the agent from writing code. That's been the problem with the whole vibe coding, is it loves to write more code for you, more code than you wanted.
Yeah,
So
in all the wrong places.
Say some more. In the Kiro IDE, it very much has phases, right? It has planning, design, and development. You're explicit, just like you were talking about. You go into planning mode. And it sounds like that constraint is, before I move forward, I need these things because that's part of the spec process. Whatever you define that to be, or is defined in the tool, which is a good thing. You can prototype, you can take it so far, black box some things while you're working on the spec to try out ideas, but still contribute a bad. Okay, put this in the spec. This goes back in the spec, to memorialize, make that part of the artifact that you're creating.
Memorializing memory is like such a difficult part, and goes back to context as artifact, which is what these do. And prior to this kind of tooling, for me anyway, I would demand, I would type / I think it's memory. My memory's that bad. I can't remember. But at any rate, you would use an internal command to say, remember that I'm using this version of this API. And because that's kind of critical and is a big problem with large language models. So it would write that to a Gemini.md file in the root of the folder I was working in, or for the whole system, for my laptop. And if you didn't curate that, if you didn't go back in and carefully manage that memory file to get rid of things that have been obviated by discoveries or changes down the road, you really could get wrapped around an axle, because it would be like, wait a minute, Brad said that I want to use version X, but in the same file he's telling me to use version Y.
It's interesting what things it will save. Sometimes it's like, that's not one I would have wanted you to save, right? That's actually not right.
Right.
Which goes, you were talking about the tech stack earlier. And I find this for just using using Google Gemini or ChatGPT when I'm not doing it inside of an IDE or a development tool, is even when you tell it the tech stack, first of all, you really need to have a running list of what your development environment is, what tech stack you're using for this project is, explicitly what versions, because it will either assume things. I mean, I've had it like say, okay, go download this. Well, that doesn't exist anymore. They canceled that. They deprecated that. Actually,
right,
nothing
or worse. It uses a totally different package manager than what you're using. UB, PipX, and pip, for example. It's just like
exactly
toss a coin.
Package manager. So you got to be very explicit. I mean, I list everything from the full development environment that I have set up through Homebrew or in that environment to what are the keyboard memory macros that I use on the Mac. Because I might do some things, some automations that way. And I have to explicitly tell it, do not suggest that I use things that have been deprecated. Do not suggest things you are not in the product yet, but may have been mentioned in a product release. So it's
if you're not using robots.txt, you're already in trouble. It should already be there.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm sorry. More specific to what we're talking about, though. Sorry, I was just thinking about protecting yourself, but requirements. If you don't have a requirements file, you're asking for a misunderstandings like you're talking about. So you gotta start from a good foundation, especially if this is a brownfield endeavor that you want to use spec-driven development for. And actually, I would add to that, and I know we want to talk about the tech stack a little bit more, but I felt from my short experience with Kiro and Bob and now Gemini CLI with Conductor that, you need to buy into this. This is not like I think I might use a bit of it here or a bit of it there, or just try it today and not use it tomorrow. You are basically saying, I want this to be spec driven. And as such, I'm going to be using an internal tech, what does Conductor call them? Where you have a task, they call it, hang on, I'll just look it up.
Well, what you're describing is opinionated software. It has an opinion about how you have to develop software, and you have to buy into that.
It makes it very opinionated, right, man? So they call them tracks. So you have a track. And I should note that it's very agentic, doing the initialization for tools, at least like this one, in that it read my code base. It asked me what my objectives were, et cetera, to do all those things we were talking about and setting up the spec-driven development, basically a file structure, a directory structure filled with markdown files. And I was shocked to see it come up with the first track for me. It's like I just finished initializing and it said, oh, I really think that you want to do semantic search enhancement, because I was trying Gemini has a deep research, which is basically you're not calling a model directly, you're calling a sort of implementation of a model that is very opinionated, and like we were talking about with Claude, like skills that's basically built on skills. And this thing, which is, if anyone's interested, is called Deep Research. Sorry, these are all hyphens when I pause. Deep Research Pro Preview 12 2025.
Well, that is a mouthful.
And it said, oh my gosh, why don't you add semantic search to that? Because I have a different sort of mechanism for doing this outline research, either through semantic search or through the deep research. And it said, why aren't you combining them, Brad? You idiot. And so it's specced out that track with all the requirements, all of those planning steps that you mentioned to build this. It's really fascinating.
Well, I'm not an expert in any of those tools. So we just don't use them, living inside of them, doing work in them every day. But it seems to me the Kiro is the one that's bought into the process as much or more than any of them. Because yes, it has those planning phases, and Bob has architecting, et cetera. They all have kind of some version of that. But Kiro, really, I mean, it includes specs for acceptance criteria, traceability testing,
Yeah.
user guides. It's really, AWS made a big deal about where we're using this. This is our development environment across the company. You could see how that might be because they put so much into not just doing agent development or using agents as part of development, but making it, dare I say, methodology. I don't want to start any methodology wars, but yeah, some opinionated
Extreme
way.
programming.
Yes, yeah. Boy, I lived through a
Sorry.
few of those. The Agentic wars are upon us. But whereas like with anti-gravity, you could definitely see that they've leaned heavily into the agent first idea, using multi-agent orchestration to do work for you, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't remember if they explicitly call it spec-driven, but a version of that. You
It's
can
kind
give
of
it
doing
plans
that.
and screenshots.
Yeah, it's just like open code, and they just have it built in as different modes of working.
Mm-hmm. It's one of the things I'm curious too is because I think anti-gravity is supposed to be good at working at much larger code bases, and that's sort of there's lots of challenges, and different vendors have taken on parts of it. And when you work with much bigger or multiple code bases, keeping that in the context window and the memory, working with that, know where God forbid you say, hey, put in that search, and whoops, that's not where I wanted it. That was a different project, right? But that's part of the complexity too, them being able to take on more complex work, not just coding tasks or types of code to write, but the work of writing code and the environment that you're doing it in.
Yeah, that's a big deal, isn't it? And you can see that reflected similarly to Kiro in IBM Bob, in that they have built in, using their, what would you say, 50, 60 some odd years of experience with COBOL.
A few. Yeah, going
You
back
know?
to something called punch cards, I think. Well, decks or switches on a computer, I believe.
Those
yes.
exist in their repository. They have fine-tuned. Sorry, wow. They have fine-tuned their the models that they use for these specific tasks, like you're talking about in managing a large code base.
Mhm.
So they were early to come out with this sort of, let's use LLMs to refactor from one language to another, or to
Mhm.
transcode. And with, I think it was COBOL to Java that they did. And that has grown into Bob, and it plays a role in Bob for managing large code bases, not based on what they got off Stack Overflow, or God help us, Reddit. It's actual, like, IBM, professional services, use case number 29X94 has a very, distinct solution and design pattern that's tested in, some world bank. And now you can enjoy that and use that to solve problems across a complex code base. Love that.
It is interesting. Yeah. The Bob leaned into the modernization path, right? Helping people modernize. And a lot of that is, of course, the LLM that they're using are LLMs by default, which pushes that button. The other we haven't really talked about, I don't know if you considered an IDE. Cloud Code, is something you plug into your IDE, or you can use it very much from the command line, but essentially you're doing the same thing instead of them issuing their own VS Code version. You do it just like you do with, I guess it's Klein is what it's called. I've used it for a fair amount on a project I was doing a while back. And then same thing for OpenAI's models, that you interface to it either through a window in the command line in your IDE, as well as directly on the command line. So there's sort of these different phases of, it seems like so far, anti-gravity is kind of the most opinionated in the user experience of, we wanted you to work this way. AWS Kiro is the kind of development process opinionated. We want you to work through these design steps, these requirements, spec-driven steps. Bob on the re-engineering side, we'll see. But Bob was pretty early when we saw it, so we'll see where it goes. But the tracks that different people are going, and you can see part of it is the customers that they serve, right? Lean heavy into agent development for Google. That makes sense. You could see why IBM would do more of a refactoring and helping people modernize code.
Yeah, because you know how we used to talk about data gravity? We still do. Because
Data
it's all designed around locking your data into a platform that you will pay for, in perpetuity.
It's called cement boots.
It is cement. Yes, it's very lucrative cement. But developer gravity, it means a lot. It always has, and it always will. And what I see evolving right now is this sort of, my walled garden, my semi-walled garden is better than your semi-walled garden, either because it has better models in the back end, or better tooling on the front end, or better services in the middle of the two. Mm-hmm. And so, these are all, I've said for a long time that the frontier models were always meant to be platforms, not just models. And they are absolutely evolving into that. But the tooling, the things like you and I have been talking about today, that we decide we like something, and so we invest time in it. And if you invest time in it, this thing, that we all know and love, called not entropy, but what is it, where you build momentum and can't stop the momentum from going?
Can't think of it. It's not Brownian motion.
Inertia. It's inertia.
Okay,
yes, yeah. Need to think about the second law of thermodynamics. That inertia carries forward, and the more in an organization that they get inert in these tools, the more likely you are to buy this back end services models that are associated with them. And
that nails it.
You see, all the investment right now in I think making these enterprise grade is critical and really a good step, because we have changed how we think about code, have we not, Mitch?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it is. This is first time that I can think of that we really are buying into at the very front end of the development tool, the IDE, of how we're going to develop software. Right. It's been more of a window into our repository and tools and plug area. It's been the Swiss Army knife, right, for development. I call it the smoking shop. We they're all brands of cigars, but we'd like you to stay here and smoke them here.
That's right. We have a lovely room with leather chairs. Just sit here.
Exactly. This is where you should stay. Not that everybody out there smokes cigars, and I don't that much either. But anyway, it is an opinionated way that organizations, when they sign up, they're going to use this tool as their IDE. Then that's the path they've kind of chosen to go down. So it's how whether it's cement boots or walled garden or a lighter touch, it's to keep you in that environment. Of course, they work really well with their technology and make it easy to do that, as well as work with third-party stuff.
That's the key with the platform oriented tools, the hyperscaler oriented tools you see from like Kiro and Bob, like we've been talking about. Kiro, is steadily surfacing functionality that's been, sitting inside of Bedrock and their broader AI platform, for instance, SageMaker, for some time. And that's only going to broaden out. I can see all of their analytics tooling, for example, starting to be baked in with headless business intelligence being a part of your application development process. Your spec will have a spec on how you want to visualize data and work with data, for example.
Very good. Well, we've overstayed our welcome here. Gone a little long.
Sorry, it's the holidays. It's the holidays, Mitch.
I think we're being watched and we're being trailed here. So we should get to our last segment. Last segment is the drop.
Okay, it's time for the drop.
Well, it's end of the year. For us going into the next year, we're obviously deep in our planning cycle, kind of towards the end of our planning cycle, what we're working on. There's kind of two areas of focus that I'm looking at right now. One is how are we moving observability, security, behavior, governance into the development process using agents. And, companies like New Relic and Dynatrace, and I could go down the list of companies that have been part of announcements with some of the major vendors that they are now part of AWS's security agent or DevOps agent, or pick your vendor. So other parts of the software development lifecycle are not waiting. Not every vendor is doing this, but I think the folks that want to make sure they're carving out a path for themselves to be part of this kind of AI SDL or AI DLC. Very much part
more
of
letters, please. More.
I'm warming up for New Year's Eve, I guess. I don't know what I'm doing, but anyway, that's definitely on my mind going into next year, as well as many other things. How about you, Brad?
Yeah, and I'm sorry. The longer the acronym, the better. 3-letter acronyms aren't even trying.
I can't.
Got to
I
really
can't
put
even
some effort
approach the one you gave. Then, well, that was the name of something, but
it was
the
the name,
dash.
right? Yeah. So I think for me, and it's interesting, given what you just said, it jives with one of the predictions I have for the coming year, which is that data engineers are going to morph a little bit into integration engineers, and that companies won't be buying their data platform based on the specs of the platform as much as they will the way that platform integrates with their investments that might be with other vendors on other platforms. So it's definitely changing how these age-old these stable jobs that we've had in the industry for so long. For me, what's on my mind right now that I'm trying to wrap my head around a little bit is I saw a note from one of my colleagues yesterday talking about how agentic development was going to break the database. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know, because we built databases when we had very little resource to play with, and we built them in order to scale massively and be concurrent as possible across that scale. And so I think the problem isn't so much in doing reads and writes, because we know how to do that in pick your database structure. It doesn't matter if it's a blob storage or columnar NoSQL or KV cache or wide wide table. Sorry, like Cassandra. It doesn't matter. They all are pretty darn performant. The problem is agents need instant context. They need, and I think you and I chatted about this a while back with if you're out of sync even a little bit, big problems can happen. And so timely access to accurate information is critical. And how do you do that? Well, you certainly aren't doing a query from a data warehouse to do that. You certainly are bringing the data closer to the code, to the agents. And you can do that through streaming, which is why we saw IBM pick up Confluence, because that's kind of a big deal. And another way is the developer's favorite pastime, which is caching.
In managing cache.
Almost every problem can be solved with caching. And it already plays a big role with the agentic tools we're talking about. Like every time I hang up from a session with Gemini CLI, it tells me that I saved 80% because it had that many hits from cache, that percentage of hits from cache.
Wow.
Wow. I really am forging new territory, aren't I?
You're supposed to forward those to your manager. Yeah, I say, it's like going to the grocery store. You saved $72 this trip to the grocery store.
Because Brad is so boring in what he does. Everyone's doing the same thing.
Post it on Reddit.
I'm trying to think about, how companies can speed up, access to data for agents.
Agent latency, waiting for the data, the context that it needs. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, my friend, it's been fun. I have so many ideas for things for us to talk to. I know you do too, so we'll keep them rolling. Hey, contact us at agentsofdev@futurumgroup.com. If you'd like to make a suggestion, if you're interested in making an appearance, maybe being part of this, we've got some folks that are interested in doing that. And we're kind of getting things rolling with Brad and I, and then we'll start to have some guests as we do that. So send us the feedback. Thanks for following us on your favorite podcast platform. And thanks for coming back to listen to us jawbone for a little while about building software in this new AI agent agentic era. On behalf of Brad, myself, it's been fun. We'll see you on the next episode.
Control, this is Agent Dev. I'm in position.
Copy that, Dev. Stand by for go.
Standing by.